Okay, so Max from the Discord channel from Simmetri asks, can we create BPM controls to trigger these unit timelines? So we just showed in the prior demo how to create these packaged animations in this unit timeline using this unit timeline system. And now the idea is, can we make it so that our BPM pulses out these at a particular rate with our BPM. And so we're going to go right back into that example that we did before. I'm going to create a new unit in timeline, and then I'm going to create our object here, our little animating object. Maybe we'll do something different this time. Let's do a cylinder, and maybe we'll make the cylinder kind of spin in place as our animation. So I'm going to create a new, I'm going to remove its rigid body, trigger activating, I'm going to remove that. I'm going to create a new key track for the cylinder entity. And then I'm going to record that, and then we're going to have it rotate in place. So I'm going to, maybe after 1 second, we'll have it rotate 180 degrees, like that. And then I'm going to create, again, another kind of maybe ease in and ease out. Let's see what that looks like. Does that. So now at every beat, we want it to kind of do that. That's not great. Let me do maybe back and ease out. Let's see what that looks like there. Maybe that's kind of neat. So at every beat, what we'll do is we'll create an emitter, and every single time it emits, it'll emit at a rate that will correlate to our pulse, to our BPM pulse. So I'm going to create this live tool, this BPM controls. Magically that works now. And so now what I'm going to do is create an emitter, a new emitter, and maybe we'll have this emitter kind of animate back and forth like this, and then it's going to pulse at our BPM pulse. So to set it to the BPM pulse that corresponds to our input controls here, I'm going to go under continuous for the node emitter properties. You'll see that the constant pulse is what it's set to right now. I'm going to assign under the universe the BPM pulse to that. That was created when we created these live controls. Excuse me. And so I'm just going to drag and drop that onto there. So now it's going to emit. In this case, we want it to emit this new thing that we just created, this unit timeline. So I'm going to take on the node emitter, I'm going to just pick that unit timeline that we just created. So now it's going to emit on that BPM pulse. So now, every single time I tap, hit play, tap, 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 tap. So now it emits these on that beat. And so now if we just animate this somehow, I'm going to create on its transform, I'm just going to create like an animation that goes back and forth like this. So to do that, I'm just going to create a new signal controller on the position X. I'm going to create a new waveform signal, and I'm going to give it an amplitude. This is the total distance it moves in the space. 15, let's say. And now we hit play. That's going to go back and forth along the x-axis. I'm going to zoom out to get a better view of that. And now I'm going to tap a beat here. And voila. Now it emits it on that. Maybe we can play around with this. Maybe we can either, it's too repetitive, so let's do a random signal instead. And crank up the amplitude on that. And so again, after 20 or so, right now the node emitter is configured to stop generating them. So it only does 20, but we can crank that up with this. So that's one way. We can add another signal maybe on the vertical axis. I'm going to add another signal controller on that vertical axis. Add a waveform signal on that. So now it goes up and down as well as across. So now maybe we'll move the centrum of all this all the way up there. So now we get that kind of idea. Did I change something here? Oh, right, I have to tap it. And by the way, I'm always tapping the beat every time, and that could be annoying. If you know that your BPM, every time I hit stop, I have to like re-tap it when I hit play. Let's say you know that your BPM is 130, you just want to initialize that to something ahead of time. I'll show you how to do that. If you go to the BPM pulse, hit edit code, you'll see that this is where the initial BPM that it starts with is 0. I can just set that to like 120. And now every time I hit play, it'll just be at 120, so I don't have to like tap that every time if you're just testing something. So there we go. It's kind of weird. I can go and actually edit this original unit in real time here. We can go to the cylinder entity. Maybe we'll fatten it up a little bit, setting a different radius here. And so now we get a different, thicker kind of thing. So that's one way to do that. And then we can also make it pulse it to the BPM. So let's say we want this thing to actually pulse with the BPM as well as getting emitted to the BPM. I'm going to go to the unit and the cylinder entity. I'm going to set a on the shape. Let's say we want to pulse we want it to kind of pulse like this to the BPM, like that. I'm just going to set the BPM pulse on that radius property, and so by default now it will pulse to the BPM. And so now what you're going to see is, so now they emit and they pulse like that, but in this case it actually works. They all pulse on the same BPM, so we're actually okay. If we had different, let's say we wanted to create some variance here. I'm going to keep playing around with this. Let's say on this we just added this to the radius of this, the BPM pulse of this. Let's say we want some variance. This is a kind of a weird example, but let's say we wanted to like vary the interval in every copy. So every copy that's made, maybe this is different for every copy. So this is on every beat, 2 is on every other beat, 4 is on every 4th beat. Maybe we want the copies to kind of be synced at these different intervals. And so to do that, I'm just going to go here and I'm going to create a new clone variance on this. And then it's going to, we basically, on this copy value, I'm going to create a new normal distribution. And then we're going to set a standard deviation of 4. It's going to basically go from 0 to 4. I'm going to go above the mean. So from 1 to 4, it'll choose a random value for this interval every time it gets copied using this trick here. And so now the other thing we have to do is, if we go to the node emitter, it's going to make what's referred to as shared copies. We need to switch this to copies. If we use shared copies, we're all going to have that same, they're all going to share that same value that's going to be set on copy. We need to just make sure we do full copies. Each one will have their own set of properties. And now when we hit play, they all emit, and some are synced at every other beat, and some are synced to every beat. So now you get this kind of interesting, some hit on the beat, others are waiting for every 4th beat. It's kind of another interesting way to do this. So there you go, another little micro example. Keep giving us examples and we'll keep doing them for you.